Welcome back to another episode of the Ultimate Relationship Show. I'm your host, Midori Verity, and today we are going to be talking about some very important topics, such as how to avoid getting divorced again, mind reading those couples who think that they know everything about their partner and they know what they're going to say. We're going to talk about why you shouldn't do that and so many other hot button topics, because today I have an incredible guest. Her name is Nicole Martinez, Dr. Nicole Martinez. And let me just tell you a little bit about her. She received her master's and her doctorate from Illinois School of Professional Psychology. She is an adjunct professor for 3 graduate programs. Wow. She's a blogger for the Huffington Post and a contributor to the Chicago Tribune. And she has some amazing, amazing information that if you're in a relationship and you want to stay in that relationship, you want to hear this interview. So welcome, Nicole. Thanks for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about your background, what you do with couples, and just give us a brief synopsis of what you do.
Well, I've been working as both a therapist and a psychologist total probably the last 15 years, which most people wouldn't think if they look at me, but I have. Part of the reason I started working with couples is, one, I love it. I love being able to sort of balance out the personalities and the problems and help fix them and bring them back together. But also, when I used to be part of a group, for some reason, everyone was terrified to work with the couples. It was something about the 2 people at once, and they thought they couldn't do it, and I love it. So that's part of the reason it became one of my specialties, was that I was brave enough to, and they don't realize how rewarding and how great it is to work with them in general.
Yeah, and do you find that it's really important to work with both of them versus just one or the other?
Absolutely. Working with both of them together helps you in real time see sort of the dynamic and the issues going on and be able to deal with them like right then and right there, versus giving someone a suggestion like, how about you go home and try saying this like this? You can actually sit there and say, ask them, or let's practice, say this like this or do this like this. How did that feel for you? And see the result.
Versus he said this, she said that, she did this, right? So
absolutely.
A clear picture, I think. I think it's a much stronger way to solve problems. But you know me, those people who've been with me watching these, I like to really jump into the important questions right
absolutely
away. So this is something that I have been guilty of, and my partner, my husband, has definitely been guilty of, and I can't wait to put that to him. But it happens in relationships. I mean, it's
all the time.
It does, and it's mind reading, and what that is where you think you know what your partner's about to say, what they're thinking, what they're doing, but you're not always right. So tell us, I know you've studied this in depth, so tell us.
I have. Yeah, I've actually studied this in depth because I started to see a pattern of it when I would work with couples. And I wrote an article about it for the Huffington Post, and I've been interviewed a few times on it, this idea of mind reading. It's that we have been with these people for so long, we think we know everything about them. We think we know, like a lot of the times, we don't even ask them the question because we think we know, well, this is what they think, or this is what they're going to say, or this is what they're going to do, or this is their intention behind it. And so when couples would come to me and I would see them mind reading, I would be like, that's really interesting. You didn't even ask because you assumed what they were going to say. And I'm like, why don't you ask them right now? And I will tell you, and I think I'm lowballing it, 75% of the time they were completely off base on what their partner would have said, because it's sort of like they take history and apply it to every situation. Well, this one time he said this when I asked him this, so he's always going to say that. You may have caught them on a bad day. It may have been just that particular situation. So you have to be willing to ask the question and see that there can actually be different answers.
And also, let's talk about when you are having a conversation or an argument or a fight with your partner and they are acting as though they know what you're about to say.
Mm-hmm.
What type of response does that elicit out of the other partner?
It shuts them down. It makes them mad. It's sort of the idea of you always, or, this whole idea of you always, like, none of us always does anything. And so, but it's that sort of thinking. You're always going to do this. You always do that. Like 100% of the time, you're always going to act the exact same way. And that's not true at all, because that's not true of any of us.
Right.
Depending on the day, depends on the reaction that you get.
There's more than one side of us.
Absolutely.
For us to remember. So what are some ways that, because we all have these natural tendencies, right? It's things, it's habits that we've kind of learned, or they just become habits because we've done them for so long. What are some ways that we can break out of, what are some questions that we can ask? What are some tips on how we can break out of doing the mind reading?
Well, I think the first thing is ask the question. When you're holding yourself back and you say, oh, I'm just not even going to bother asking because this is what I know they're going to do. No, actually ask the question. It's very different if you keep asking the question, you do keep getting the same response. That's a very different thing, but usually that's not the case. So be willing to ask the question, be willing to have that communication. And as we were talking about a little bit before we started, communication is one of the hugest issues people come to therapy for. And a huge part of the communication is the mind reading. And so people are afraid to even ask a simple question, because they think they already know the answer. And they're usually wrong most of the time. So.
I think I read somewhere that there was a study done and they showed that you said 75%, which is right along there. But
I said I thought I was low.
Yeah, I think I read something where it was, 80%.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
Wrong. That's a huge number.
Yeah.
That's a huge amount of wrong.
And I think that's something for people to be mindful of, to say, wow, 80% of the time people are wrong. I shouldn't assume I'm in the 20% that's always right. maybe I should.
I think that's pretty safe to assume. You probably are not in that 20%.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, that's great to know. Another huge issue is we know the divorce rate is so incredibly high. Mm-hmm. And even for those who may have been in a long-term relationship and it ended, I want to talk about not just second marriages, but, how do we avoid the mistakes, the big fat mistakes that led us to a breakup? Give us some tips there. What are some of the patterns that you see, and how do we break those patterns?
Well, I think that we see that as human beings, it's sort of this idea of we repeat the same patterns. We're drawn to the same type of people. We do this. We make the same type of mistakes. We do sort of like these bad habits over and over and over again, whether it's, I eat my feelings and I eat bad things when I eat my feelings. It's these patterns that we do. So if you are in a relationship and you've had a previous relationship, you've had a divorce, you don't want to repeat it, look at the patterns of what you're doing. Look at what you're doing, because a lot of the time if you stop and look, you can see, oh my goodness, I'm doing this again. I'm doing this pattern or behavior that contributed to this divorce. What can I do to change that behavior? And these are the sort of things, sometimes it takes doing couples work. Sometimes it takes that you can change this pattern on your own through sort of hard work and time. Sometimes it takes actually communicating to the other person and finding out, okay, what is going wrong here? What are sort of your like hot topic, like biggest complaints about the relationship, and like, what do you need? What would you like me to do? And really, we're not asking you to change yourself, but if these are feasible things and realistic things, try to work on them and change them, because a relationship is compromise. It's not, I'm stubborn, I'm digging my feet into the sand and saying, I'm not changing anything. I'm going to meet you part way, and so that we can both be happy and feel like we're both getting something out of this.
So let's talk about some of those things, because I'm sure not me, but some of us are unaware that our patterns are destructive. Mm-hmm. We might think that we are always right, and too bad that our partner can't be more like us. So enlighten us here. What are some of those patterns that you see that we may not be aware that we're doing?
Probably the three patterns that I see the most often are issues with communication, issues with finance, and issues with intimacy are three of the biggest patterns. And so when your issue is communication, it's learning to communicate. It's not mind reading. It's learning to talk and listen and answer questions. You know, a lot of the time, men and women are very different. And a lot of the time, like even with my own husband, I will preface a conversation with, because as women, I feel like women are emotive. Women, we want to be heard. Men figure, if you're telling me this, you want me to fix it. So I will preface a conversation saying, all I need you to do here is listen to me. And you will actually see him like visibly calm down and be like,
you know what, we have to stop there, because that is such a key insight that we don't realize. So you guys listen, I'm going to repeat what she just said, and I want you to please listen. Men, we just want you to listen. That's what we want. And ladies, they want to help fix situations. So be aware of it. That's what it's in our DNA. It's from years and years of evolution. It's just what comes natural. And I see
Absolutely.
these struggles often. And it's just knowing that, being aware that men and women are different. That's just the way they are. We think different. And so I love that you just pointed that out, Nicole, that that tends to be the way that we respond. Not everyone's the same, but in general, that would be our natural reaction.
And it sets an expectation for them, which helps them. And that's part of like what puts people at ease, is they sort of, when people know, you know, when we look at men are like this, women are like this in general, men sort of get prepared. Like when we sit down and we're like, I need to talk about my day, or I'm upset about something going on with us. They're like, okay, I'm prepared, because what I have to be doing is thinking about how I'm going to fix this. When you preface it with, I just need you to listen to me, they're like, oh, okay, I can do that. I can just listen and be supportive, and that's great. Like, I don't need to be coming up with some way for you to fix this problem. That's not what you're asking of me. I can learn to be a good listener.
Yeah. And just asking questions, and it's so huge for us, for ladies, for women, just to have someone to hear us.
Yes.
Sometimes. And, you know, guys, I know sometimes you just don't want to, you'd rather be watching the game.
Of course.
You have to, at least for a little while, to really listen in. So I love that you just mentioned that. Okay. So what else? You also talked about finances. I know that that's huge. Do you have some just quick pointers on that, on how
I do. I think it's actually a really important idea when people are, even this may seem early, but either first thing in the marriage or when they're engaged, or even in a long-term relationship. You know, we've been together with someone for years. We live together. We share finances and bills. Very early on, when the relationship has become that serious, talk about finances. Don't let it become this issue that is a constant battle, because people come from different backgrounds and people feel about finances different ways. Let's say both people grew up not having a lot of money. So one person's way of handling that may be, whoo, I have money. I'm going to splurge and spend it on everything because I've never had it before. Another person, the other part of the couple, may have grown up with very little money, but they're a big saver because they're afraid of not having money again. And so they end up butting heads a lot on money. And if they only understood that this is where each of them is coming from, they could find a middle ground. They could find, okay, I am comfortable if we put this much away of our money per month, but I am also comfortable with having this much money per month for fun, for being able to like splurge a little and go out and do that. And so those combinations are really important. Are you going to keep bills? Is it best for the relationship? And a lot of people will think this is strange, but some people, it's the best thing to do. Keep them separate. Keep your finances separate. Agree that I will cover this, you will cover this. We'll keep our bank account separate. And as long as everybody's always covering everything, great. As long as things are covered, there's no reason to argue about it. Sometimes it's when we don't have these conversations that people get in a fight and they're like, you bought what? You bought a Coach purse? How could you spend that money? Like, that's such a waste. I can't believe it cost that much. And so having these conversations avoids any post conversations about that. So the earlier, the better, because that's one of those issues that just grows and grows and grows and becomes a life of its own.
Oh my gosh. And at first it may not seem like a problem until it becomes a ginormous problem. Finances are a huge part of it. And I like that you also said, there's certain people who are certain experts, finance experts, that say you need to do it exactly like this. But you mentioned, do what works best for you. And I agree with that.
Yes. Because I think there's not one formula that works perfectly for everyone. Everyone is different. So you have to figure out, as a couple, here's what works best for us. And if if there's problems, talk about it and tweak it. Mm-hmm. And it's going to avoid so many future fights. And it's just a huge general issue. And it's one that you can do away with just by having a few conversations up front.
Right. I just read an article recently that said couples who talk about finances once a week are the happiest. Mm-hmm. Who knew? But that's how important it is.
I have a lot of couples that schedule a weekly time where they will talk about finances for 20 or 30 minutes. And it has taken so much pressure off of what used to be constant fighting over money, because they plan things out and they're like, okay, here's these bills. Here's what we're doing. Here's what we have coming in. Here's what we have going out. Here's the state of the union with our finances. And it really does help, because sometimes people feel in the dark.
Yeah. And I think when there's a clear plan, mm-hmm. it just takes away all that, those concerns. I think yes. It really helps quite a bit. So that's a good point.
Absolutely.
Now we have to get to intimacy. Tell us what you see in that arena.
In that arena, I see a lot of different things happen. I see people, obviously life gets hectic. People come home from work, they're tired. People have kids. There's all these issues that get in the way of intimacy. And it's really easy to let intimacy sort of grow further and further and further and further apart. But it's such an important piece to keep, because the further you let it go apart, by the time a lot of people come to me, it's been a long time since they have been intimate or close or even affectionate towards each other. So just for me to say, all right, go home tonight and be intimate would be crazy, because it's awkward at this point.
They can barely touch each other.
Exactly. We've let it go so long. We're in therapy because we're having problems. The last thing in the world that I can fathom doing is doing that. And so we talk about starting really slow. And one of my exercises that's really common that I have people do, that 100% feedback people love, and it really starts to restore that intimacy, is that I have them in the beginning every day, and it doesn't matter how they do it. They can do it face to face. They can write a note. They can send a text. They can send an email. I have them tell each other one thing they appreciate about the other person daily. And I have them do this for several weeks. And so many couples come back and tell me, we're going to keep doing it. Past the point that it's an assignment, because they love it so much and they learn so much about the other person, things that they didn't know the other person even was aware of or acknowledged that they did, and something that the other person loves about them that they had no idea. And it starts to rebuild that closeness between them.
It's so huge. I talk about that with a lot of my clients, is that I call it the gratitude attitude. Mm-hmm. Because it becomes this mindset. And so many of us, especially when you've been together with someone for so long, you get into these patterns of negativity, where it just naturally becomes easier to be negative. He didn't fill up my car. He didn't do this. He didn't do that. He left his towel on the ground. He left the toilet seat up. All those things. And it's easy to build on that. But when you reverse that and you start thinking of all the things that you're grateful for, or that that you love about them, it really helps change that mindset into a more positive, happier place. So I think that's huge, huge, huge. And I think it's a great place to start if you can't even touch each other.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think it's for any couple, couple doing
absolutely. That. Well, and it's the idea, what you were just touching on, what you were saying, you said to your couples, it reminds me of kids, when we talk about when they're acting out or when things are bad, no one ever catches them doing good. They only point out when they're doing bad. And we need to do that in our relationships as well. We can't always be pointing out, you're doing this wrong. We need to catch each other doing something good, doing something loving, doing something small, showing appreciation. It goes a long way.
Yeah, it goes huge because all of us do so many things every single day. And to hear that appreciation, hear that they actually acknowledge it, it makes us feel good, and it makes us love the other. It makes that bond so much stronger. So I think that that's something that we need to do in every relationship, not just our marriages, not just with our kids, but
absolutely.
Friends, right?
Well, and I think a lot of the things that we're talking about, if you really think about it, these habits spill over into other areas. Think about mind reading. If you're doing it at home, you're doing it at work, you're doing it with your friends, it's a habit that you've developed. And so by learning to not do that, you're going to see a change in your relationships across the board if you start changing that behavior.
Yeah, I agree. And I heard somewhere they said, be curious. Instead of going in as a mind reader, be curious and find out, ask questions, but come from that place. My husband just walked in, so I'm hoping he's hearing us right now. Maybe I should talk louder. But yeah, they say be curious, because I think that that makes it more interesting too.
Absolutely.
To find out. So this has been so enlightening and so much fun to hear about.
Thank you.
But it is time for our truth or truth game. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, great. So let me just go over my bylaws for this truth or truth game.
Okay.
You have to answer every question. There's no passes.
No pass. Okay.
No passes. and try to be as honest as possible.
Okay.
And most of the questions I'm going to give you ABC, or
okay.
There's a couple where you can fill in the blank, but I'll tell you when that is. So
all right,
let's get started. So the first question is, who is the hottest celebrity of all time?
Mm-hmm.
A, Bradley Cooper. B, Tom Brady. C, Leonardo DiCaprio. Or D, Robert Redford.
I have to go Bradley Cooper.
He seems to be the winner. I've gotten that the last 3 times. So
really,
Bradley, you're the hottie. You're the hottie according to the Ultimate Relationship Show.
There's something even just so natural about him that I think is very attractive. If I was going for older sophistication, Robert Redford would be number 2 for sure.
Yes, I used to just absolutely love him. Okay, next question. What is one thing we wouldn't guess about you?
One thing that people wouldn't guess about me is that I've been in practice for 15 years. That usually is shocking to people. And most people with the name Martinez are expecting someone else to come out and meet them, because obviously I'm red-haired and green-eyed. But I am married to a Filipino, and then people are confused by that as well. But a lot of Filipinos have Spanish last names because the Philippines was conquered by Spain many years ago. So
I would have never. I'm Filipino. I would have never guessed that. So that is the one thing that I would have never in a million years guessed about you.
No, yeah, people every time are like, "Are you the right person that I'm supposed to be?"
Sure? Are you sure? Okay, so third question. What's the most attractive quality in a man to you? A, integrity. B, humor. C, big pec muscles. D, a fat wallet.
Integrity. And humor is such a close second, because if someone can make me laugh, I find that so attractive. But integrity goes across the board.
I agree. I think if we can have both of those, that's all 4 of those. I think that's nice too.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. Which one should I do? Okay, pickup lines. What pickup line would work best on you? Number 1, can I follow you home? Because my parents always told me to follow my dreams. Number 2, can I take your picture to prove to all my friends that angels do exist? And number 3, I seem to have lost my phone number. Can I have yours?
I'm going with number 1.
Number 1, can I follow you home? Because my parents always told me to follow my dreams. I think that's a clever one.
It is clever. The other ones sound a little more cliche, but one has a creativity that the others
are missing.
It would get your attention.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Okay. Well, let me just say, so to find more information about you, because I know people are going to want to talk to you, you can go to our website, midoriverity.com, to find it. Is there any other ways that we can tell them really quick that they can find you? Are you on Facebook?
I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is probably the best way. I do have an open profile, so anyone who wants to get in touch with me can email me and reach me that way. That's probably the best one right now. I am in the process of building a website, but that obviously doesn't help us today. But I will have that up very soon. So I would say probably LinkedIn. Sending me a message is the fastest way.
Okay, great. So again, if you go to my website, midoriverity.com, that is where you will find that information, and you just click it and it'll take you right to her. So I encourage you, if you are struggling in your relationship and you like some of the things that she was talking about, reach out to her, because she has all kinds of things. Or if you're a mind reader, if you think you're a professional mind reader, definitely reach out to her. So thank you so much for being here with us. And
thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I loved all the insight that you gave us.
Thank you.
Anyway, have a great day, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.